Episode 12 is here. Chris Schmidt, and we'll talk Boilers and Big Red.
I'm Mitch Sherman. We'll get the latest on Nebraska's quarterback situation.
Hi, I'm Bill Doleman, and I'm still amused by the Michigan sign-stealing scandal.
It's Elijah Herbel here, and we'll wrap up this show by looking at the weekend slate of college football.
Welcome into it. It's episode 12 of the Average Joe Sports Show. Chris Schmidt, Mitch Sherman, Bill Doleman, and Elijah Herbel. As always, give us a follow on Twitter with the Average Joe Sports Show, the AJ Sports Pod, YouTube channel, the AJ Sports Show. Who's ready for Purdue? I love vintage pictures of trains going off the tracks on Twitter. It's always one of my favorites. Unfortunately, it's been Purdue that stayed on course the last couple of meetings with Nebraska.
Well, last year, though, Nebraska, in a kind of a track meet, I think most people felt like if Nebraska had the ball last with Trey Palmer running free the way he did for the entire game, if Nebraska had the ball one more possession, that the Huskers would have won in West Lafayette. Now, they're not in West Lafayette, nor do they have Trey Palmer anymore. What did he have, like 270 yards receiving or something like that in the game?
He went off, and then the following week, Mr. Witherspoon locked him up.
Right. But nevertheless, he had one of the great individual performances in Nebraska football history, and Purdue had the ball last, ran out the clock, and won the game. But the Huskers were, let's just say they were game that night in West Lafayette and had a chance to win. They just didn't do it. So it wasn't like they got blown out on the road.
Well, came back from a couple of touchdowns down. It'd be nice, Mitch, for the Big Red to have a similar offensive output. Not sure that's going to happen. It's been a story of next man up this week for Nebraska.
Yeah, I don't see 37 points on the board for Nebraska on Saturday at Memorial Stadium, considering the lineup that the Huskers are going to put out on the offensive side and also the playing conditions that we're likely to see with cold and some rain, maybe a little ice in the forecast for Saturday afternoon. Some good late October Big Ten football weather, but that's not conducive to a 43-37 game like we saw last year in West Lafayette. This series has had a history of some bad weather, and in recent years it's had a history of Purdue victories. Looks like 4 out of 5 for Purdue over Nebraska. So I see this one as a pivotal game for Nebraska when you look at the big context of its entire season and where this thing's going to go over the next 5 weeks. Matt Rule made mention on Thursday that there are 29 days left in the season. So he's got it counted out for his players, and he said you can do anything for 29 days. So go out there and play hard, give it everything you got. Exactly. Empty the tank. It's not 3 months anymore. It's 29 days. So we'll see if they can turn Saturday into one of those 29 days that he's got high expectations for.
And Mitch, you said you'd be surprised if there was 37 points scored on Saturday. And it got me thinking, there might not be 37 points scored total. I know
combined.
The Vegas total line, I think it's at 39.5 right now. That even feels high to me with the weather and the way Nebraska's offense and defense have been playing. This might be a 10-7 type ball game.
It could be. I think at its heart, what Purdue is a defensive team because of the head coach and what he brings there. It's like when Bo Pelini coached Nebraska, even if there were weeks where the Huskers scored a lot of points, inside the locker room and day-to-day within the program, there was so much focus on defense, and I know that's the way it is with Purdue and Ryan Walters, considering his background. So both of these teams, I don't think, would be heartbroken with the game that stays low scoring. They would be comfortable with that, and you throw in some tough playing conditions. Yeah, I think the under 35 even is a possibility.
Purdue's one of those teams that Nebraska fans looks at on the schedule, and maybe not so much now, but when you first got into the league, that was, you put a W next to Nebraska, the, dare I say, winnable game on the schedule. And Northwestern's been an issue. Illinois has been an issue. Purdue has been an issue with Nebraska in the West. And so far, Matt Rule in year one is 2-0 in the West. Minnesota's also been a headache. And That was down to the wire. Can Nebraska make it a consecutive, dare I say, third consecutive Big Ten win in 2023 and continue to position themselves? You mentioned the pivot point. Each week it kind of keeps stacking when you look at Nebraska's schedule and it being manageable and vastly different than past years of some juggernaut stacked back-to-back or every other week.
Yeah, I mean, this is a schedule that I think a lot of previous Nebraska coaches would have liked to have faced. Whether you're talking about the interim last year with Mickey Joseph and what he could have done coming down the wire against a lineup of teams and the quality of teams, not just the names. I mean, you still face Iowa and Wisconsin, but it's a little bit different Iowa and Wisconsin this year than what Nebraska has been accustomed to in recent years. And Purdue is potentially in that same category. You see the Boilers having had Nebraska's number. Well, this is not Jeff Brom on the sideline and everything that, the challenge that he created where his offense was just, it was that outlier. Much like Nebraska is defensively, where it creates a situation that opponents have to scout Nebraska differently, unless you're scouting the game weeks in advance with advanced scouts in the stands and iPhones pointed at the field. This Nebraska defense is something that takes a little bit of extra work to get used to, and that was the Purdue offense under Jeff Brom, and it's different. Things have changed. The shoe has flipped in a sense in that way to look at this game. So will that be enough to get Nebraska over the top and break trends in this recent history? I don't know. We'll see. I really don't have a great feel for how this one's gonna go, other than I feel like the whatever's coming down out of the sky is going to be a factor in kind of shaping the flow.
Well, that's what I'm curious about if you're Purdue and you've had a bye week, how are you preparing for Nebraska? I'm sure they're saying we've spent a third of the time on the offense, a third of the time on defense, a third of the time special teams, and then the rest kind of a miscellaneous. But if you look at this Nebraska team, there's Ryan Walters, a defensive guy, their new head coach. Does he say, okay, we need to really dial in on what they're doing defensively? That's how we're going to spend the majority of our time, and that presents a challenge because Nebraska's played so many different players. It's not just a schematic thing. It's, okay, when this guy's in, they're going to do this, and when this guy's in there, we've got these two big guys along the defensive line. There's a lot of concern as to how to prepare and attack Nebraska's defense. Offensively, what challenges will Purdue present? How do they prepare for Nebraska's offense? And if the weather is bad and you got a Big Ten game where you got to run the football, they've not exactly run the football with any great success this season. They're only averaging like 3 yards per carry as a team, and then they're going against that Nebraska defense. I'm like you. It's an intriguing matchup because you really don't know what Purdue is going to do under our first-year head coach, the weather conditions, and who has the strength offensively, I guess, in a game like that.
Well, if Nebraska gets the Purdue team that started to look like it was going to turn things around when it went to Illinois or faced Illinois this year and took it to the Illini. That game was in West Lafayette, 44-19 on September 30th, the day that Nebraska got waxed by Michigan. These two teams appeared to be headed in opposite directions, but since then you've had Purdue go to Iowa and lose, and then played Ohio State at home and was blown out. So I don't know that that we have a great read on what Purdue is, but I do know that the ceiling for the Boilers is pretty good based on the way that they played in that last game of September. So is that the team that Nebraska gets after a bye week for Walter's squad to rest up and get extra prepared? If so, then I would not make Nebraska the favorite in this one. But there are times looking at Purdue this year where you think, okay, that's as we said, a winnable game, which is
they're 2-5.
Yeah, which is right. That's where we're at with Nebraska. The winnable game thing, there's some history to that with Purdue and even there at
some offenses taken.
Yeah, and that was Indiana too. That
just the whole state of Indiana.
The whole state of Indiana has taken offense to Nebraska.
It's a basketball state,
right? To Nebraska's viewing them as beatable opponents. It should be personal with Nebraska this weekend, and I have not heard any rumblings around Memorial Stadium with anyone at Nebraska, at least on the outside, the public-facing side, taking offense to Ryan Walters' comments about how he hates the N.
Yeah.
That's from his days as a Colorado.
Well, see, I was wondering
linebacker.
how Nebraska's offended him. I think that's the big question.
Well, is it true? I saw it on Twitter, and I guess I don't know for sure if it's true, that his last game as a Buffalo was the Alex Henry kick game and the Sue pick six game. That was his final game as a college athlete. I saw that on Twitter today. I didn't actually fact check it. Now I'm bringing it up on a podcast without having fact checked it. So,
Makes for a good story.
There's professionalism for you. But maybe that's why his last game as a Buffalo, if that story is true, was in Memorial Stadium whenever Alex Henry delivers the game-winning kick and then Sue puts the nail in the coffin with the pick six.
It's 2008.
08.
04 to 08.
He was a senior in 08. Yeah, that was not a great memory for him to have at Memorial Stadium, and
he took that personal.
I took that personal. Now, he's been back to Memorial Stadium. He's been back, but not as a head coach, and I'm sure he has memories of that game. Maybe Nebraska could bring Ndamukong Suh, and he's still looking. He's still looking for a home. I know.
Still looking for a gig.
Right. Sue wants to suit up with somebody for the last few weeks of the NFL season and do his part-time NFL diligence, maybe win another Super Bowl. But before he does that, could he come back to Memorial Stadium and walk across the field and shake hands with Ryan Walters during the pregame? I'm sure there would be great memories.
If he's got any eligibility, think about the interior D line of Ty Robinson, Nash Hutmacher, and Ndamukong Suh.
Well, I think your fullback problems are solved, too.
Oh, that's an even better point.
Line him up at fullback. Let him go both ways.
Line him up anywhere on the offensive line, actually.
If Alex Henry shows up to make a cameo, Purdue may throw a helmet on him with the way the special teams has gone for the Boilermakers field goal-wise and extra points. They've been a bit of a nightmare with their kicking game. Return-wise, they're okay, but in a tight ball game, Vegas says 2.5. Nebraska's favored. Potential bad weather, new head coach. Nebraska's down 3 linemen. It's going to come down to a turnover, and it's going to come down to probably making or missing a kick. And what type of defense do you get from both squads in that red zone?
Well, this feels like, as we kind of laid out earlier in the week with the Big Ten West, a lot of times the game plan is risk aversion. This feels like a game plan where both offenses are going to be in risk aversion mode because of the type of swing that the defenses can provide. In Nebraska, it's less about the Purdue defense and more about their tendency to shoot themselves in the foot with turnovers so far this season. With the Purdue offense, it's more about Nebraska's defense, their tenacity. They haven't quite got the turnover numbers that you'd expect for a defense that has seemingly played so dominant. But I think with both offenses, you're coming in here with the weather forecast and with what this type of game is going to be. As I said earlier, kind of feels like a 10-7, 13-10 type ball game. I think there's going to be a lot of risk aversion with these teams. Hey, you're 3rd and 10. We're going to run the football here on 3rd and 10, punt it away, and play the field position game. I'm expecting that kind of game at Memorial Stadium on Saturday.
Checking Purdue's punting stats because those might come in big. Who's got the better punter? Is it Brian Buschini? Or Purdue has Jack Ansell, who is averaging just under 40 yards a punt. So if Torrey Taylor was on the other side on the other sideline for Nebraska this week, then I think that would put them over the top. I mean, he would be the most valuable. He is the most valuable guy on the Iowa team to begin with. Well, other than Cooper DeJean, but he's the best player. Torrey Taylor is just the best player in the country. We'll go there.
Well, welcome to a podcast covering the Big Ten West. We're going to look into the punting numbers, defense, analytics.
This is a great day to look into punters and Purdue has a serviceable punter, but not a guy who's necessarily going to be flipping the field every time he kicks the ball. So there's another potential opportunity for Nebraska to win in the special teams game. Hey, I mean, we joke, but special teams is going to be huge. Mm-hmm. And Nebraska coming into this game, Matt Rule said on Thursday, is down at starting kickoff return specialist and Tommy Hill, who, if he's going to play, it sounds like he won't be returning kickoffs, and he was dinged from last week. And then definitely down its number 1 punt returner with Billy Kemp out for an extended period of time or multiple games. So Alex Bullock is going to be back there returning punts for sure, and we'll see on kickoffs. That's an area that Nebraska can't afford to have a mistake. You had a freshman kicker for the Huskers. Alvano has maybe turned a corner. He worked with Chris Brown over the bye week, the old Nebraska kicker from the national championship
Not the
years.
recording artist?
No, not the former Colorado running back. It's the Chris Brown, the former Nebraska place kicker and NFL place kicker who had a son. His son Colby was at Omaha West Side with with Alvano, and Chris has worked with Tristan for a while, and they revisited some of those teachings during the bye week, and Tristan talked about his jab step. If we want to get into some kicking mechanics,
yeah, we'll take your calls.
Email us, hit us up on Twitter. We'll talk kicking mechanics. So maybe an assist from the Huskers. One of the great kickers in Nebraska history. If Alvano goes out and wins this thing on Saturday.
Hey, Buschini's been pretty good the last couple of weeks. I don't think he was off to a great start this season. But in the last couple of weeks, he has been a weapon offensively. He's changed the field a little bit and done a terrific job. I think Alvano does seem to be kicking with a little bit more confidence than perhaps he had earlier this season. And I know Matt Rule has said, we are not going to fair catch on kickoffs, but maybe this might be a week if you don't have Kemp and Tommy Hill back there returning kicks. Maybe you just field it, or you take it at the 20 and 25 and just call it good. Let's just go. Not have somebody do something reckless with the football.
Might not be a bad idea. That was at the beginning of the year when they had Ramir Johnson returning kickoffs, and when they set that policy in stone. I mean, if the wind's blowing and the ball's slippery, that's probably some sage advice.
Yeah.
Be conservative and take it at the 25-yard line if you have the opportunity.
Well, Purdue, Nebraska week, Average Joe Sports Show. Find us on Twitter, the AJ Sports Pod. That's where you follow on Twitter, the YouTube channel. Watch, subscribe, the AJ Sports Show. And Chris Schmidt, the Athletics, Mitch Sherman, Bill Doleman, and Elijah Herbel. Let's talk quarterbacks for just a second. And I know there was a lot of hand-wringing with Nebraska fans, especially in that first quarter with Heinrich Harburg. Pretty tough start. Really showed up, though, in the run game, which is what he does well. And then a big kind of put-him-to-sleep play to Malachi Coleman. But the question was out there, does or would Nebraska look at going back to Sims? That was out there in social media land pretty prevalently in the first half of the Nebraska-Northwestern game. We're watching and rewatching the GB Rewind, and you're seeing Sims race around on the field. But Mitch, Bill, guys, it feels like Elijah, Nebraska's settled on Harburg. They're going to coach him up, play him through it, and they're going to let him play through some mistakes.
And can we just say that if we're talking GB Rewind,
I was going to go to the same place.
That we have to say we have to make a note. Talk about this for 30 seconds.
No, that's fine. Yeah.
How the episode opened
at the salon.
Where was it at?
The nail spa. That's where I'm going with this. North 27th Street. It's confirmed. Next to the UPS store in the parking lot by Hy-Vee. We were right.
Way up on North 27th.
There used to be like a CC's Pizza right there.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about? I think it's since closed. It's north of the Hy-Vee and the Walmart and the Sam's. There's that little strip there.
Used to be a Toys R Us up there, too.
And now it's a liquor market.
Yeah, it is.
It's the best.
It's Dad's toy store now.
And Terrence Knighton, if I'm not mistaken, said that they want to go back regularly, like every other week. So this is a place for Nebraska fans to come out and see their D linemen getting their nails done. They're getting their pedicures on North 27th Street.
But let it be known, Elijah Herbel and Mitch Sherman, they know the backdrop of Lincoln better than anybody else. We got like 2 frames, and we're like, that's North 27th right there.
Well, I thought it was in the facility to begin with, but then I quickly pivoted and said North 20. It looks like North 27th, and I was right.
Bang.
Yeah, I don't think we spend just 30 seconds on this. I really do. I'm very impressed that you guys know your North Lincoln and pedicure geography, the combination thereof, better than really anybody. So kudos to you two guys.
Who here has had a pedicure?
Oh, me, of course.
Same.
They're luxurious. I don't get the hate. They're luxurious, and hey, while I'm there, you might as well do my eyebrows too. Like,
okay.
Maybe 30 seconds was enough.
I'm not into pedicures, but I mean, if there's a Hy-Vee in the backdrop, I mean, I'm getting it. I'm nailing it.
See, I got some like calloused up feet, so the women are always like, really
Do you have a hammer
scraping on them.
Do you have a hammer toe?
All right.
No, I'm just saying, like I'm ticklish down there, and they're always laughing at me because I'm just such a wuss sitting in there getting these calluses scraped off.
Yeah.
Watch what you say, Elijah.
Do so. Clip it and post it.
I do the post, and I'm not posting that.
No,
I'm not taking that out of context on myself.
I've taken my wife a few times, and I've tagged along.
All right, so I derailed that, but we're talking about the GB rewind and
the quarterbacks.
Jeff Sims, and you see Jeff Sims, and he looks just fine, and he's running.
And has for weeks, by the way.
Right, running around with nothing to protect that ankle. I think Matt Rule and Marcus Satterfield now have acknowledged that since the bye week that Jeff Sims has been okay, and this is not a situation where Heinrich Haarberg is playing because he's the backup and Jeff Sims is hurt. That was the case, I think, Northern Illinois. Really, you get much beyond that, and they recognized that they had something with Haarberg, even if it wasn't like a guy who was throwing for 300 yards a game or running the offense in the ideal way that Nebraska wanted it to run. They had something with him with the intangibles and in the way that he rallied the team. And here you look up a month later, more than a month later, and they've won 4 or 5 games with him as their starting quarterback. Mm-hmm. That's hard to ignore if you're the Nebraska coaches. So this isn't a competition every day. They'll say it is. These are the things that you say as a coach. You saw also in that GB Rewind episode, Rule threatened to take the black shirts off the backs of the starting defense if they didn't get a stop in practice one day before, I think it would have been before the Northwestern game, after the bye. He said, you guys are going in the locker room, taking your shirts off, and giving them to the twos. Get ready, Jay. Talking to Jay Terry, the Nebraska equipment manager. You're going to go, and they got to stop. So this is, again, to stray from the quarterback discussion, this is, again, an example of a coach through this season who is growing comfortable with what buttons and how to push those buttons with his players. I don't know that in camp in week 1 he threatens to take the black shirts away at practice if the defense doesn't get a stop. I don't know that he says some of the things to those guys at halftime that he did in that halftime speech during the Northwestern game. So, you're seeing the evolution of a program, but also the change with the head coach and just him recognizing and knowing what to do and how he chooses to coach this team.
One thing about the GB Rewind that it does, it kind of blows out of the water any coach speak that Rule could try to present on Monday or Thursday when he meets the press, because it's exposed for all to see and hear how he talks to his team, throughout the rest of the week. So if he were to step to the podium on Monday or Thursday and say, well, we're just looking to take it one game at a time, and we hope to come to play on Saturday and do the best we can, and may the best man win. All of that's completely out of the water because
he's got to be the same guy.
He's got to be the same guy, which I think for the most part, he's not. If we die, we die when he meets with the press, at the media center. But I think people are getting a pretty good sense that he is genuinely who he is. Maybe a little more fiery. The language. But I think people understand that, they're getting, Coach Rule in both ways that are genuine. And, look, Tom was the same behind the scenes as he was in front of the camera, too. Just in a very, very different way. But I don't think you get a sense that, Matt Rule is putting up a front as the head coach at Nebraska.
He did mention late this week that this is probably going to be the only season that they do this.
Right.
That he wants to give the fans and the recruits a look into the program. He wants while they're building this and people are curious about what Nebraska is with Matt Rule, he wants them to be able to see this extra layer behind the scenes. And that I think they'll still do creative stuff. I know they'll still do creative stuff, but I don't know that it's going to be week to week during the season. Maybe still in camp. Certainly in the off season, they're going to do stuff like this to keep people interested. But as far as going through this stuff during the season after they win games, notice they don't do it after losses. But after they win games, this may be the only chance we get to look behind the curtain like this.
Do you remember? This is going really kind of deep into the archives, but when Tom spoke to the team at halftime of the '95 Orange Bowl when Nebraska beat Miami for his first national title, and he was very prescient in what he was saying was going to happen in the second half. And, and the Husker Vision cameras were in there capturing everything that he said in typical Tom low-key demeanor, and spoke to them in very even terms, but he said there's going to be a penalty in the second half. Now, I don't need you to go out there and get mixed up. And, of course, of all the people who drew the penalty, it was Christian Peter. But I remember Tom said something like, I don't need you going out there like a banny rooster and getting in trouble. And
that's not what Matt Rule says.
Right. And I remember Tommy Frazier, we asked him about it, and Tommy's like, a what? A banny rooster? But Tom said that in the locker room at halftime. I'm pretty sure it was in the halftime locker room speech. Said,
it was.
I don't need you going out there like a banny rooster and causing problems or something. But he called the play where there was going to be a penalty. Christian Peter did not, get involved in it. And he said, we're going to wear him down, and everything happened. But I just would never forget Tom saying, that's about as, I guess off colors he's going to get, a banny rooster.
It was the ultimate Nostradamus moment for a Nebraska coach. All of the other coaches have been striving to live up to that. I mean, Matt Rule at Illinois, he made some comments before the game. I think it was seen in the GB Rewind series about how things were going to go. We talked about we're going to get to the 1 yard line as a defense, and you guys are going to get a stop, and so. But everybody's trying. Nobody can match what Osborne did in that halftime of the Orange Bowl against Miami speech.
Can I ask, what the hell's a banny rooster?
Well, that's what everybody else wanted to know, too.
Look it up.
And maybe to this day, that's still an unanswered question, but I just never forget. I don't need you going out there like a banny rooster, and Tommy's going,
I would say angry chicken. I mean,
it could be.
Hey, while we're talking about memorable moments in Nebraska history, just to go back a few minutes to that Colorado 08 game, I looked this up, and that did end Ryan Walters' career. And Colorado was playing for a bowl that day. Came into Lincoln at 5-6 and had that game.
They were up 2 touchdowns,
somewhat in hand until the late heroics by Nebraska. So his memories of Nebraska as a bitter place, it ended his football playing career.
Oh, sorry to hear that.
That was a rough day. I'm sure he has bad memories.
And whenever you look now at this Purdue team in terms of parallels, I know it's not the last game of this season, but they're kind of playing for their bowl hopes as well, coming out of the bye week at 2-5. When you look at the schedule they have ahead, it's Nebraska, and then they have Michigan, so you can chalk that one up as
Ohio
your 6th loss of the
State,
season.
Nebraska, Michigan sandwiched.
Yeah. But you do have the bye week coming into Nebraska, so I think you can push the buttons. We're talking about Ryan Walters here in terms of how important this game. It's a must-win.
It's a must-win.
Because following Michigan, you have Minnesota, Northwestern, and Indiana, which realistically 3 games that could be won, could be lost by the Purdue team.
Well, if they lose this game, they're not going to be bowl eligible.
It's done. Yeah, it's done. So you're selling that to your team. Your backs are up against the wall. You're coming out of the bye week. You have had an extra week to prepare for this Nebraska squad, and if you don't get it done, you're not going bowling this year.
I mean, I shouldn't say that because they have to go to the Big House next week, and as long as they change their signals, everything's going to be fine for Purdue in that game.
Let's go there for a second. This is the Average Joe Sports Show. Mitch Sherman, Bill Doleman, Elijah Herbel, Chris Schmidt. Find us on Twitter, the AJ Sports Pod, and with the YouTube channel, the AJ Sports Show. Subscribe to both, follow both. What's your guys' gut feel here? You've got 3 entities that can make a decision. The NCAA doesn't move very fast. You have the college football playoff that also has a say, but probably wants Michigan, if they earn their way in as conference champ or in that top 4, it's what they look like now, top 2 for sure. You want them as a possible playoff team. And then you have the commish and the Big Ten that can make the ruling. He's got to weigh where Michigan's at right now, and he's also got to weigh the other teams in the league that have been offended.
Yeah, it's not going to be the college football playoff. They're gonna ride the coattails of the decisions
ESPN.
the decisions made by the other entities here. And the NCAA, I think you're right. It would be unprecedented for the NCAA to act on an investigation that's happening in the season that where they're investigating a team and then act during that season. Maybe this will be the first time, and if they do and they want to rule that Michigan is ineligible for a bowl game, then they're not going to the college football playoff. But I see that as really, really unlikely. Just a little bit more likely, but still unlikely, is the Big Ten doing something. Michigan brings a lot to the Big Ten. I mean, that's the reality of it. And you have a new commissioner. Does he want to go out on this island? Does he want to say, hey, Michigan, shame on you. You're ineligible for the next 3 or the next 2 Big Ten championships.
How's Fox going to take that?
That's a tough one. That's maybe they could say beyond this season, but that's then Jim Harbaugh is gone, and I don't think anything's going to happen. I think, and as we were taping a week ago on Thursday when this story started to break, and we kind of had some fun with it as we recorded, about how this is just gamesmanship, and it is, but as more details have come out and just how in depth Michigan went, the lengths that it went to buy tickets to so many games and send people around, and I mean we're talking about a significant edge that Michigan gained in games, and our staff at The Athletic, Max Olson, my coworker, had a story that came out on Thursday on The Athletic. People should read it. He talked to another Stein Steeler, someone who does it legally. At a different school, and this coach person associated with the program, he laid out how you can get an edge from doing this and what it means for Michigan to have committed these sins. I mean, it's also Michigan was being investigated by a private firm that was hired by someone.
Ohio State.
Yes. That hasn't come out, but
Diane Ray.
Yes. Where do we send the invoice to in Columbus, Ohio? There's all kinds of
across from the hospital.
There's all kinds of side stories with this thing that make it such an interest. I mean, it's really amazing how this story has progressed over the 7 days since it broke.
And there is still a little bit of comedy in this story.
There's a lot of comedy, to be honest with you.
But the thing that's made me laugh the most this week is that it's come out that Michigan bought tickets to every single college football playoff contender game last year, like team, except for TCU. Mm-hmm. That's one of the funniest things to me. They like Tennessee, Alabama,
Washington, Oregon,
all of them. They didn't go to TCU. And who do they face in the college football playoff in TCU? And who do they put up their worst performance of the year against but TCU? That is the comedy in that to me is just it can't be understated.
You guys heard the one about how the one losing season that Michigan had under Jim Harbaugh is in 2020 when there were no people allowed in the stadium.
Man.
Look, I think whoever's going to make a decision is going to make it at a snail's pace, and it's like I had said through the entire college basketball scandal that may be starting to wind down, that whoever succeeds Bill Self at Kansas is going to be in a whole lot of trouble someday. Of course, that's now gone by the wayside. I think that if Jim Harbaugh, is not the head coach at Michigan next year, much like Pete Carroll after he left USC, he'll head off and go get another job, make a whole lot of money, and forget that he was ever there, and will just go on and do his coaching future someplace else. I would look to look at it as in a conspiratorial way. That is there somebody in Columbus who has been suspect of what Michigan's successes have been? Okay, maybe. Will they wait to see what happens after the game at the end of the season? Should Michigan defeat Ohio State? Well, we are going to take care of this next season as soon as we can. Or if Ohio State wins it, will there be an immediate decision as to, we're going to suspend Michigan from going to a bowl game, right? But if Michigan wins again and beats Ohio State again, and they're in the college football playoff picture, we're gonna get you after January.
Well, what's interesting is you look ahead. If there is some sort of suspension in 2024, and the way this strikes me, personally, not being an NCAA expert, not being an NCAA investigator, from the outside looking in, kind of with some precedents, take away a couple scholarships for a year or two, maybe suspend Harbaugh for a game or two. But you look at the 2024 schedule, they play Texas week 2 at home. How interesting would that game become if Jim Harbaugh is suspended?
I think it's going to be.
I would put money down.
I would also put money down that he is no longer at Michigan.
Who do the Bears play that week?
Good question. Bears or Colts?
I'm thinking that they, if Michigan gets in trouble, they call the law firm of Rob Manfred, and to see how he decided the penalty for the Houston Astros for their sign stealing scandal back in 2017, and say we appeal on precedent that nothing be done. So there you go.
Well, I mean, the college football playoff trophy at the end of the year, it's really just a piece of metal.
Yeah,
that's all it is.
Yeah. I'm amused by this whole story, to be honest with you. Look, and maybe if Nebraska had been a victim of it, maybe I might feel a little differently. But I'm still thinking they went out there and figured out a way to really read the gray area in the rule book, and they bought the tickets.
And they were not
kept a sellout streak alive.
Wise enough to figure out how to kind of launder those purchases.
I mean, how much money was this every single year?
The guy was making $55 a year.
And how much did they have?
It wasn't
budgeted?
coming out of his pocket.
No.
The report was out earlier this week. I think it was somewhere in the range of $50,000 they had budgeted every single year for this to go around the country, and the amount of people that they had going and doing this and buying tickets. And
it was in the tens of thousands. Yeah,
that's good for the economy.
It's
though,
investment.
Right?
It's not quite Taylor Swift impact.
I mean, in this economy, you're helping out the local universities, the airlines. This is good.
Hotels.
It shows you that this guy Connor Stallions was in no way acting by himself, because he's not spending that kind of money out of pocket. I don't care how much of a fanatic he is with the Wolverines, and it calls greatly into question Jim Harbaugh's statement about not knowing anything. I think that almost is the most comedic.
Unaware
comedic element of this, that Jim Harbaugh didn't know this was going on. I mean, who are you talking to here? Like, I mean, you sell that one to a preschool class, and beyond that audience, I don't know who in their right mind is believing that he was in the dark here.
How about the football stories in Michigan this season?
Yeah.
I mean,
cheeseburgers and
sign stealing and phone calls.
I mean, it sounds like the dictionary definition of something the NCAA throws out a lot with their punishments: lack of institutional control. Either you didn't know and you should have, lack of institutional control, or you did and you're lying about it, which also kind of shows that lack of control.
You know, there have been many books written about Michigan football over the years, and this one is going to be a doozy.
This is a Netflix documentary.
Yeah, on the 2023 book about Michigan football, and maybe it'll end with J.J. McCarthy winning the Heisman Trophy and Michigan getting banned from the college football playoff on the Sunday after Thanksgiving.
But how happy is Michigan State right now? They're out of there. They're sort of, kind of out. They're always in the shadow of Michigan anyway. But they were dominating the headlines for a couple of weeks, and now this comes about, and maybe Michigan State's going,
well, they're trying.
Hold on a minute.
They're trying. They're trying to keep pace.
Maybe they're the ones pushing the story
you
too.
You saw what they did on their scoreboard during the Michigan game. Last week.
Yeah,
I know.
Don't forget about us.
Yeah, maybe they're.
I mean, Nebraska next week. We can spend more time next week going into this, but they're delving. They're going into this territory up in that state. What's going to happen when Nebraska's up there? Both teams are at home. Michigan's at home on Saturday night against Purdue. Michigan State's at home, of course, against Nebraska at 11 a.m. next Saturday. And I'm kind of excited to be there in that little corner of the world to see what's going to hit the fan when those two teams get on the field and on different venues.
Well, and as somebody who worked at Huskers, I just want to go back to this for a second. The Michigan State Jumbotron incident. I feel like rule number one at all times, running a big screen at any sporting event, is
no Hitler.
Don't put Hitler on the big screen.
No Hitler.
That seems like a really easy rule to follow.
Right.
And it's shocking that in 2023 people don't know that at this point. But yeah.
It's shocking that it would have happened in 1950.
At any time in history,
happened.
the number one
rule.
rule.
Have Jumbotrons then, but hey.
There's
Don't
four guys
put
we
Hitler
can't,
on the Jumbotron.
There's four guys we can't put on the Jumbotron.
I don't care what year it is. Yeah.
The first three are Adolf.
I mean, if you're making a top four, like Hitler, Stalin, Pol Pot, I mean,
Osama.
Yes, there are like just the don't do it's that I feel like who in the meeting that week was like, Hitler on the big screen? Yeah, I don't think anyone's going to get mad about that.
So they said this was outsourced to some third-party trivia company.
The Quiz Channel.
Sorry, that doesn't. I'm not feeling sorry for them as a result of that. There's a lot of things about Michigan State over the last several years that I'm not feeling sorry for them about. This fits into that category.
Well, like somebody who worked at Husker Vision, before every single game, we'd go set up our cameras, and then we'd come back down into the training table, and we'd have an entire staff meeting. There's like 40 people in there, and we'd run through every single element of the script for the day, what's going on the big screen, what we need from the cameras, and it shocks me that at no point nobody stepped up and went, yeah, that trivia question today about Hitler, maybe we should cut that one.
Yeah, not a good idea.
No.
Average Joe Sports Show rolls on here as you can find us on Twitter, the AJ Sports Pod. YouTube, the AJ Sports Show. Bill Doleman, Mitch Sherman from The Athletic, Elijah Herbel, Chris Schmidt. Guys, let's talk about some games this weekend. Busy weekend in the Big Ten. Busy weekend around college football. Mitch, Bill, either of you guys ever been to the cocktail party? Georgia, Florida?
Have not. Been to that stadium, though.
Okay, yeah, bowl game for Nebraska v. Clemson.
Georgia?
Right?
Georgia or Clemson?
One of the two.
Yeah.
But UGA's minus 14.5. They're dinged up a bit. Florida's gotten up off the mat a touch, but probably a little too much Georgia. But points are a little high, in my estimation, at 14.5. Probably a 10-point win for UGA over Florida. Okay. Who knows? Maybe Florida can sting them.
I think Georgia has awoken, and that was not necessarily the case in the first month of the season. So if you're going off of what Georgia did at the beginning of the year, yeah, the Gators look good here. Just 37-20 last week against Vanderbilt, but they woke up. I think when they have got an opponent on the other side that's worth their attention, and you'll see that as the year goes on, and they'll play Alabama in the SEC championship game, and Kirby will get over on Coach Saban again. But I like Georgia big in this one.
A little more. They're a little more dialed in when they need to be. I like the combination of Buck Bellew and Lindsey Scott against Florida in whenever they meet in the cocktail party. That's an old school reference.
And it's a beautiful day for a cocktail party. 83 degrees and sunny in Jacksonville on Saturday. That's
not 38 in snow.
Yeah, no, I much prefer the 83 degrees and sunny with cocktails outside.
And by the way, haven't they tried to do away with the cocktail party theme? Didn't the powers that be, or the PC powers that be, try to? Just like the Oklahoma-Texas shootout, we can't do that anymore. Didn't they try to do away with cocktail party?
I think it's been rebranded, but it's always going to be the cocktail party.
Yeah, exactly. I totally agree.
Yeah, no, but I
think you could get rid of like every one of those, like the Civil War. That's probably not appropriate, but
on the heels of Spartan Jumbotron, right?
Yeah, right. I'm okay. I mean, is that Oregon State Civil War?
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah. I keep calling it that. Of course, they're never going to play again after this year.
They'll wave at one another.
But back to Georgia here real fast before we move on. Talk another game. Georgia, they're not as dominant as they've been in years past. They're still a dominant football team, though. I think they're a team that runs the table, makes it to the college football playoff. It's maybe a team more like the likes of Michigan that can expose some of the flaws in Georgia. I don't think Florida is that team. I think Georgia wins and covers. Game
I'm excited about, right down the road, 11 o'clock kick. You can watch it while Nebraska's warming up. Oklahoma.
I have that down.
At 5-2 Kansas. That's a sneaky good game. How's that going to go? I mean, Kansas... Yeah.
Defense for the Jayhawks isn't what it's been.
Yeah, Jalen Daniels, the QB, is likely still on the sideline.
Yeah, Mr. Bean is going to get the nod, but OU sweated one out last week.
It's UCF?
Yeah.
Yeah. And in Kansas they lost to Oklahoma State, but before that, last time Kansas was at home, it was a 29-point win against UCF. So I think that one, Oklahoma probably wins, but I think Kansas will make it close. Points are, what are they?
-9.
Yeah, I'll take the Jayhawks.
Isn't it amazing how a year ago Kansas was one of the hot stories in college football? Right, and
this year.
Lance Leipold. I know, but
this year they're better, and they're not a story.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's they've just kind of faded off the certainly away from the headlines.
It was just so shocking to see Kansas winning games last year.
Yeah, but this year you don't really hear anything about them.
That's even more of a compliment to Lance Leipold that he's done it for a second consecutive year, and people are just used to it now. They're expecting it.
Look at who Kansas has beaten in their 5 games, and this is no offense to Kansas, but they're not going and beating world beaters. And they've lost a couple games big to Texas, Oklahoma State, who is not great this year. They're solid,
they're better.
But they're not a top 25 team. You lose by a touchdown. I mean, you beat UCF, BYU, Nevada, Illinois, and Missouri State. None of those teams, I think, are all that impressive. And I think that's
Illinois.
Maybe the Kansas problem
it's not bad.
this year.
I mean,
but I personally have Oklahoma rolling in this football game. I think Kansas puts up some points. I'm thinking at 40-21, Oklahoma wins this football game. It's a damn good Oklahoma squad this year. Kansas is solid, but they're just not on the level of Oklahoma.
I'm going to be weird here and just give me not only the 9 points, but give me the outright upset. Give me Kansas.
We are all over the board here, huh?
Wow.
Yeah. Give me Kansas in the upset.
Okay.
Good old Lance. And if I'm wrong, I'll bring coffee next week for the Average Joe Sports Show. Utah, Oregon. Man, this is going to be great. Big-time win for Utah at the buzzer against SC. Great comeback. Oregon got pushed a little bit by Wazoo in the first half and then distanced themselves. But these are your two most physical teams in the Pac-12.
Yeah, I was going to say contrast in styles, but Oregon is probably more like Utah than I'd believe. Sitting out here in Big Ten country, games at Utah, 2:30 kick. Oregon's a 6.5-point favorite. Ooh, I'm saying wrong team favored. Utah wins outright.
I like Utah a lot. I like Kyle Whittingham a lot. I think that's a terrifically sound, fundamental football team year after year. They love to play a bruising style. We have now come to know that Cam Rising is not going to play. Finally, we know definitively. But I think I used to think Oregon was a little closer to USC and they may be more of a speed finesse type thing. But I think Dan Lanning has them nastier than they probably have ever been outside of their loss to Washington. I think that's a motivated bunch of ducks, and I said ducks. I like Oregon. I think they've got that element that they've always been looking for, and that's that streak of nasty. And I think they go in and pull off the upset.
One thing that should be noted here: it's Muss Appreciation Day for Utah. The mighty Utah student section. Bill knows his stuff. Look at that.
Been there.
I had to look that one up. I will admit, Bill knew it off the top of his head.
How's the student section there?
Very good. They are into it. I will say this, too. When Utah made the move out of the Mountain West to the Pac-12, and I had a lot of friends at Utah and Utah grads, I said, they're really going to have to make a concerted investment into elevating from, I love the Mountain West Conference, but it's just a different game when you go and play, at the Power of Five or whatever that made-up term is. But you're going to have to invest, and they have. Their whole program, they do operate at a corporate level. But their students have been into it, and they do a great job, and they embrace those night games there. And let me tell you something.
It's an underrated venue.
It is, and the underrated rivalry in this country, and Schmidt has heard me say this for years, is BYU and Utah. That is a hate rivalry, and when they play a game in Salt Lake City, when BYU comes to town, that student section is fantastic, and it is electric there.
That's some Big 12 football,
and
baby.
Two stadiums.
That doesn't say Big 12. I don't know what it does.
That's exactly right.
Two stadiums, BYU and Utah, that have some of the most beautiful and scenic backdrops in all of college football.
Yeah.
Just absolutely. So both of them kind of in the mountains. BYU's closer than I think Utah is, but from the press box of each, you can just see the beautiful mountains off in the distance. I think, as you kind of said, Utah, underappreciated home field advantage. I think for that reason they cover. I still think Oregon's got the talent advantage. I love Bo Nix and what he's putting together this year. I think Oregon wins, but I think Utah covers.
That's fair. That's real fair. We'll wind down. Does Ohio State go into Madtown and handle Wisconsin? Wisconsin, thrilling win, kind of a gut check win for Bucky. Now Ohio State on the heels, where their defense was just flat out dominant against Penn State. That's a tough ask, isn't it? Penn State, then you go to Wisconsin back-to-back. But I think Ohio State's defense is the difference here. 14.5's too many. So I think Wisconsin covers it, but I like Ohio State to get out of Dodge with a win.
Yeah, night game at Camp Randall, almost November. They're going to play a night game at the Big House next week in November. So Big Ten is not your old timers Big Ten. I think Ohio State is potentially ripe for a letdown in this one. Not that they're going to lose, but that Wisconsin's going to give them a game. And I think Wisconsin's going to take some energy out of what was a season-saving win last week on the road at Illinois. So I like Ohio State in a relatively close one.
I like Ohio State, and I like them big. I think
Travion comes back and goes nuts.
I think their defense, with what they did against Penn State, offense was okay enough. I don't think you're going to get great games out of McCord, but I do think that Ohio State's defense is fantastic, much better than I thought, and I think that they connect with the Marvin Harrison Jr. and turn him loose, and I think they cover on the road.
Ohio State quietly is one of the best defenses in the country.
Yeah.
It's something we talked about last week on this show, the fact that what Ohio State's been in the past couple of years kind of makes their defense a little bit undervalued in the national media because everyone kind of says, Ohio State, their defense is soft. They're an offensive football team. They've only allowed 2 touchdowns to be scored in a game twice this year. One of those games was against Notre Dame, where they put up 14. The highest scoring team against them this year has been Maryland at 17. They haven't allowed 20 points to be put up on them this year, and I think if you want to beat Ohio State, you're going to have to put up 20. I have Ohio State winning this comfortably. It might not be dominant, but I think it's comfortable. A 24-7, 28-7 type of ball game. Wisconsin, with their offense, Mordecai still on the bench, I don't think they're going to pose all too much of a threat against Ohio State.
Last prediction, Nebraska and Purdue -2.5. Big Red or Purdue? Oh, this has been a tug of war for me
Yeah,
because
I wasn't planning on picking this one. Huh?
You don't want to?
No, I will.
Right.
It wasn't in my head here.
Well, it's
Should be.
I just think Nebraska makes another baby step on offense in the sense where they take better care of the football. And I think that's the difference, and I think the Huskers get it handled 17-14. Make sure you have something to hold on to because it's going to be one of those tight ones.
Tristan Alvano, into the wind.
From 47?
Not 47, a little closer. It's the snow coming down. We're going to exercise some demons from 2006 around this time of year against the hated Texas Longhorns. I know Purdue is they do have a Texas transfer at quarterback.
Hudson Card, yeah.
Yeah, I like Nebraska to win on a walk-off field goal.
Wow. I think what Nebraska should do, when we talk about special teams, instead of putting those little red eyes on the big Husker Vision board behind the goalpost in the North Stadium, I think they put a big old Ndamukong Suh up there. Maybe the whole game. Maybe the whole freaking game. They know that Suh picture where he's got his arms folded and just looks down at Purdue the entire game. All right? I think that's my first bit of advice. Does Nebraska hold on to the football? That's the critical thing. Purdue's defense is not Nebraska's defense. If Nebraska does not help them out and they hold on to the ball and that defense does what it has done all season long, nothing spectacular, I'm not changing my reservations for Indianapolis.
I think it's a game the Husker defense goes out and wins it for you. I think they're finally going to get a defensive touchdown in this game. If not, they're going to get down inside the 10. Nebraska's offense capitalizes. Low-scoring football game. Give me Nebraska winning it 14. Ooh, this might change by tomorrow.
9?
This might change by tomorrow. I'm going to go 14-6 as it currently stands. The field goal kicking has been an issue for Purdue.
That's a big step for you, thinking Purdue's going to make 2 field goals.
I know, that's what I'm saying. That's why this might change by tomorrow, but that's kind of the feel I'm getting with this in terms of low scoring. Husker offense is going to be a lot of risk aversion. I think the defense goes and wins you this football game. 14-3 maybe even. It's going to be an ugly football game at Memorial, and I think the student section's mostly cleared out by halftime with the cold weather and how ugly the game looks.
It's going to be ugly.
Well, we'll maybe have some recruiting news next week.
Yep.
We'll get there and talk to you next time on the Average Joe Sports Show. Mitch Sherman, Bill Doleman, Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel. Follow us on Twitter, the AJ Sports Pod, and on YouTube, the AJ Sports Show. We'll talk to you next week.